Not since the likes of Bing Crosby has anyone ever whistled like Andrew Bird.
I told everyone, you got to see this guy. You got to see this guy. He's going to blow your socks off. And you kind of are like there and you're like, I hope he blows everyone's socks off because I've kind of hyped this guy up a lot. Andrew Bird's My Finest Work Yet. This album was released March 22nd, 2019, recorded in Los Angeles, a couple different studios, Barefoot and Sound City, and then Dreamland Recording in New York. This was an album that I was aware of at the time, but you and I have a long history of listening to this artist, of really loving this artist, and I'm really glad that we narrowed down this album to talk about today. The way that we're going to do this is we have 10 questions that we want to talk through that kind of help us explore the album. And without any delay, I'm going to throw the first one to you, which I think kind of gets us to the crux of the matter, which is what makes this album, My Finest Work Yet, interesting to you?
It's a collection of really well-written songs that are easy to listen to for the first time. It's not going to be something challenging if somebody gave you a homework assignment and said, here, listen to this album and tell me what you think. I think they're going to enjoy it. I would also say what makes My Finest Work Yet interesting is what makes Andrew Bird interesting. And that is, he is a virtuoso violinist. So you get to hear some of that. He's a virtuoso whistler. If you're not familiar with Andrew Bird, he uses whistling like someone else may use a synthesizer. I mean, his whistling is unbelievable. Not since the likes of Bing Crosby has anyone ever whistled like Andrew Bird. And and you know what I realized going back and spending some time with My Finest Work Yet is Andrew Bird is an amazing vocalist.
Mm.
That might be the last thing that anybody talks about when discussing Andrew Bird, but it's at the forefront for me. He is a fantastic vocalist, and I could listen to his buttery, rich, smooth vocals all day. How about you? What makes My Finest Work Yet interesting?
Well, I agree with everything that you said. There's also, I'm thinking about this album and I'm thinking about the context in which it came out. Okay, so if we had a drinking game on this show, on this channel, on this podcast, of like we say a certain word, if you went through and watched all our videos, you'd be pretty hammered by the time you got to me saying timeless, because we love that word. But I really think that probably more than anything that we've talked about, this album is timeless. And I mean that on a couple different fronts. First of all, the sound of it. This thing came out in 2019 and it could have come out in the late 60s or the early 70s. And I mean that like sonically. The way that they recorded the album, they recorded it in a way as a band. They did not worry. One of the things when you record music that a lot of people in the studio will obsess about is making sure that no instruments bleed into the mics of other instruments. And so you really compartmentalize everything. This was much more open, how they used to do it. And so there's bleed from different instruments. It has this sort of, you can hear the room in the sound. His vocals have this reverb on it. It really does sound like it's from another era, yet it sounds very current, and it just has that going on from just the audio quality of it really sounds timeless in a way that is the truest sense of that word. And then there's this other element of it that I appreciated it, I think, when I first heard it, but it's really only when we prep for episodes like this and we start to look more into the subject matter of the album and the themes that he deals with. This was kind of a commentary from Andrew Bird about the world at that time. You know, this was written 2016, 2017, 2018, and then recorded in 2019. But I think a lot of it was just what was going on in the world. And the funny thing is, it still feels very like he could be writing that about today. I think a lot of these things that he's saying in there's this element of, he has said that the theme of this album is that our enemies make us whole. is kind of and that's a line in one of the songs, but it's this need that human beings have to have an adversary, to have something to rail against. And he's not saying that that's a good thing. In fact, I think this album is kind of trying to rebut that a little bit and maybe trying to shed light on that tendency of ours in hopes of kind of maybe breaking the spell a little bit. But, the timelessness part of this is that, I mean, he's referencing Greek mythology. He references ancient Rome. He talks about the Spanish Civil War. I mean, he's pulling from all of these different historical references, and yet he's also speaking about the day in which he's writing it. And I still think it holds true now. So I really like that aspect of it. That's a timeless concept. And he said that one of the original cover art, album art ideas, which they ended up going in a really cool direction with that. But he thought about having like two, I can't remember what he said, elk, or was that like locking horns, the way that people fight. And it's a kind of a representation of people kind of locked in a struggle. And that's kind of the theme of the album. So for all of those reasons, some of those I was more aware of than others before we started prepping for it. But to me, that's what really makes this album something that is more than just like, oh, here's a cool album. So yeah, that's where I landed on that. The next question I have for you is your earliest. Okay, so we're gonna have a shared experience here, but when you think about your earliest memory of, we can either do the artist, we can do Andrew Bird, or we can do the album, but we have a history with Andrew Bird. What's your history with Andrew Bird, and what's your earliest memories of all that?
Okay. Our dear friend, Doug DeWeese, has to sneak me into High on Rose before he said, let's go eat dinner at this bar called High on Rose before they start checking IDs out front, because I was not 21 yet. I'm pretty sure I was 20, 19 or 20. I can't remember exactly what year it was. So I go to this bar called High on Rose in Lexington, Kentucky, before they start checking IDs, because Andrew Bird's Bowl of Fire is playing that night. And you had let me know that this is the guy who plays violin on Perennial Favorites by Squirrel Nut Zippers, an album that we were just super in love with, that started when we were in high school. And so yeah, my earliest memory is seeing Andrew Bird play with his band, uh Bowl of Fire, at High and Rose, Lexington, Kentucky. This would have been 2000, 2001, somewhere around there. And he just blew me away. I just thought, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. I just love I remember seeing them play and thinking that even that first time, that it was like, these guys are like so retro and cool. This could have been like something from the 60s or 50s. So yeah, that's my earliest memory. What about you?
Well, there was definitely, we were big fans of that Squirrel Nut Zippers album, Perennial Favorites. To this day, I mean, we're going to have to talk about that at some point. I don't know what the appetite is for a conversation about that album, but I don't think it matters. That's just one for us, where we're going to geek out about it. But it's unmistakable when you listen to that album that there's this element of of the string of the violin that's in there. It's like, it's so prominent on the album, and it is often a scene stealer. It just steals the show from everything else that's going on, and you can't help but like look at the liner notes. I had the CD, and I remember looking up and being like, Andrew Bird, and I remember reading an article that was like, I think he was a teenager when he played on that album, and so it's like, oh, so this guy is just some like virtuoso, like you said. And so I I just tried to keep up with what was going on with him. And then, his first couple albums with Bowl of Fire, they had that vibe. They had that same sort of like old school, almost like pre-war jazz vibe. Like this could be Stefan Grappelli or something, with Django Reinhardt, and it has that vibe, and it's super cool. And then I also remember going to High on Rose, and I couldn't remember whether it was with the Bowl of Fire or whether it was solo, because I saw him at a couple different incarnations pretty close to each other. At one point, he's playing with those musicians, Bowl of Fire, and it's the more old school jazz stuff. And then he made this transition to where he's playing solo. But I remember one of those shows, and it's the one that you're talking about, is like I told everyone, you got to see this guy. You got to see this guy. He's gonna blow your socks off. And you kind of are like there, and you're like, I hope he blows everyone's socks off, because I've kind of hyped this guy up a lot. And I remember whichever it was, whether it was solo or whether it was with a band, I don't know, but he's it just from the get go, like the way that he will kind of get his strings going, and he'll start to layer them with a looping pedal, and then with the whistling that goes on top of it, like it stops you in your tracks. It's like a transcendent moment of like people are just like, what? Like it's not the type of thing that you hear. Even bands you love, you go out there and they put on a good show, but this was something, there was like this stillness that came. There was like, it was like a force that just kind of like captured your attention, and everybody's just like, what? And I think that anybody who heard him at that time, if you were in a tight venue like that with Andrew Bird, like there was no way not to be a fan of that. So yeah, that was obviously a big deal. And then just over the years, like, everything, weather systems, that was one album that we talked about as a potential to discuss today. And then, mysterious production of eggs, everything, he kept going through different incarnations, and he kept growing. And it went from this guy who had serious chops, a great voice, interesting use of whistling. He would have a xylophone on stage with him. And then he just kind of evolved into this like incredible songwriter. Anyway, I won't get too much more into it than that. But when this album came out, I remember hearing Sisyphus and being like, man, this guy has just gotten better. Like he started off at such a high level, and he just kept getting better. So that's kind of my earliest memory, kind of segueing into the actual album itself. And it was just like, it was a special experience to see Andrew Bird. I remember one time you and I traveled to Ohio State, the campus of Ohio State, to watch Andrew Bird, and he was opening for the Magnetic Fields. And I actually got a chance to interview poor Andrew Bird, who sat there and entertained my stupid questions for 45 minutes as I wrote an article about him, and just asked him everything. I was, we were in a band. I was probably just trying to find out how he did what he did so I could try to like replicate it. Never cracked that nut, but he was very generous with his time, and he was just a super nice guy. But yeah, so that's my earliest memory of Andrew Bird.
I thought of another one that I want to share. First of all, I just have such a great vivid memory of us going to that show at their art center on campus at Ohio State and seeing him. That was just absolutely amazing. And then I just thought that, you know, uh that we had just hit the gold pot, hit the jackpot, that you got to interview him. It was like, oh man, this is just the beginning. I'm sure we'll be writing for Rolling Stone soon. So another great memory I have. So I think when I first saw him, it was Bowl of Fire. I'm almost positive, but like you said, that was this great time where he came to Lexington or surrounding places a lot, and we got to see him solo too, where he was on stage by himself and just looping everything he did, which was absolutely amazing. And so we had seen him a couple of times before we went to the second Bonnaroo. I want to say the second
Mm,
Bonnaroo was maybe like 2002,
mm.
but I just have this great memory of seeing him at Bonnaroo, and I'd already seen him 2 or 3 times, so I knew exactly what was coming. But I watched him at Bonnaroo like you watched me watching Quentin Tarantino films in high school to see what my reaction was going to be to some scene that you knew was coming. I watch more at Bonnaroo. I watched the crowd watch Andrew Bird for the first time and just got to, re-experience Andrew Bird for the first time through these concert goers. It's a memory burnt into my brain that I cherish and will never forget. Just seeing all these light bulbs go off into concert goers' head, like, oh my gosh, what is this? This guy's absolutely amazing. And I remember telling you and Ethan and Landon, whoever else was there, just like, Andrew Bird just gained about 2,000 new diehard fans today after his set at Bonnaroo.
Dude, that's so good. It does. It was just like and I'm sure to this day, it's just unmistakable. When you hear him play, it's something special, and it's like if you ever have a chance to see him play live, you have to. Okay, so man, this is boy, this is a tough one. But what are your standout tracks on My Finest Work Yet?
All of them.
Right?
Well, I mean, because it was hard. It's like, how is this a standout track, but this is not a track? So,
Yeah,
I mean, I put Sisyphus, Bloodless, Olympians, Cracking Codes, and Manifest. That might be the first four tracks. I mean, the start of this album is just Sisyphus may be the best track on here. Um and that's the first track, and it's like it starts with Sisyphus and it starts on this high, and it really doesn't really relinquish the high it starts with.
totally agree. I think between the two of us, we have the whole album covered. Sisyphus, Bloodless, have Follow Run, Proxy War, Bellevue Bridge Club, but it's an album. I mean, this is a very much one of those like you put it on and you let it play. It's just so filled to the brim with incredible work. So yeah, I mean, boy, it's tough to narrow one down there, but what about lyrics? Do you have a favorite lyric? I mean, that's a one thing I think about Andrew Bird is, you mentioned all these great qualities he has. He's a great violinist, world class whistler, great voice, great songwriter. As a lyricist, I mean, his lyrics are so strong. Do you have a favorite one from My Finest Work Yet?
I do, and I'm going to share it with you right after I tell you this. I am from the South. I mean, South Central Kentucky. I mean, we consider the South. I talk slow. I also hear slow. I'm telling you, I have been an Andrew Bird fan for years. He sings so many daggum lyrics. I usually can't even. I'm like catching up. I'm a paragraph behind, like trying to catch up. Like, what'd he say? What'd he say? So it's like I really have to read the lyrics to get them all, because there's songs like Sisyphus where he has got so many darn lyrics in there. It's like, now what did he just say? So when I first thought of my favorite lyric, I went to what might be my favorite song on this album, Bloodless, and came up. Here's an honorable mention, because I came upon a lyric I like even better than this, but I'm going to share two with you. First one is, well, the best lack all conviction, and the worst keep sharpening their claws. They're peddling in the dark fictions, while what's left of us, well, we just hem and we haw. And it feels like 1936 in Catalonia. Bloodless for now. I love the song Bloodless, how it's like there's another part of the song where it's like it's an uncivil war and it's
Mm.
bloodless for now. I just love that theme, and you know I didn't do enough research uh to hear what you said about the kind of theme of this album is we need an adversary and we're always at war. But that makes so much sense now that you've said that, of what I read in these lyrics that I thought were the finest lyrics. So then after I read that lyric, I was like, well, let me make sure I know what the song Sisyphus is about, and let me read Sisyphus lyrics. Gosh, these lyrics are so good. The entire song Sisyphus, you could just read the lyrics to the whole song and that would be the best lyric, but I settled on this little part here that I love. It I'm letting it roll away. It's got nothing to do with fate and everything to do with you. I'd rather fail like a mortal than flail like a god on a lightning rod. History forgets the moderates. How how awesome is that?
Dude, that
I
is
would kill
just,
to write one song with the lyrical depth that he has.
I totally agree. I mean, man, and I had to do the same thing you did, where it's like I started too with Bloodless, and I was like, I think my favorite is they're profiting from your worry. They're selling blanks down at the DMZ. They're banking on the sound and fury. Makes you wonder what it's all got to do with me. And because I just love that verse, but then you keep listening to it, and then I was listening to Follow Run, which is interesting. It's like now after reading it, it's like I think that what that is fall or run, and then put into one word. But I think in many ways it's kind of the crux of the album, that theme that we were talking about. There's also a really good version of him on Facebook, like he has a social media video up of doing this solo with like just him sitting down with his violin. But yeah, for all your fears, you think you're making choices, but there's no one really here, just tone deaf, angry voices that are breathing in your ear. And then later, you think it's an aberration, that it couldn't happen here. Such an abomination could be the man of the year. I mean, you can hear what he's saying, you can hear it in the context of the time, but also like every time another song would come on, I'd be like, man, that's such a clever verse too. It's just, and that's always been the case with him. It's just the words are always. I don't know. The way that he plays with language is special, and it's to pick out a favorite lyric is almost as hard as picking out like a standout track on the album. It's just so good across the board. Okay, next one. What's the peak moment of this album?
Gosh, I mean, another just impossible question.
Yeah.
I kind of thought um to answer this question how a lot of times you answer the question where you think of the experience of the album, sitting down and pressing play and just listening to it start to finish and what kind of experience you get. And so I kind of thought of Fall or Run as being like a middle point to where uh you go maybe you hit a peak, but like I said, the first four tracks are just such a high point. I feel like you never come down from that, so I decided that maybe in Fall or Run or Archipelago or
Mm-hmm.
Proxy War, maybe you come down from the peak and then you hit it in Manifest. I love the
Mm,
song Manifest and
yeah.
just think, okay, here's a song where we went from kind of the middle to we're going back up to a pinnacle before we kind of go to the end. So I don't know if there's a peak moment. I think it's just it's such a fantastic journey from start to finish, but
Yeah.
I've always loved the song Manifest, and I feel like if there is a peak moment, maybe it's in Manifest.
That's good. Again, it's like take your pick. I, because I think Bellevue Bridge Club is one of my favorites on the song, and it is the closer. I'll just leave it there. I think Follow Run is kind of like I said. I feel like there is a culmination of everything that he's saying in the album is in that, and there's a lot of energy in that song. But I guess I'll just go with Bellevue Bridge Club because I mean, but yeah, take your pick. Okay, I was surprised. The next one is who are Andrew Bird's contemporaries? Uh, it's interesting because no one sounds like Andrew Bird. He's in a league of his own. Yet when I started putting pen to paper on this one, I was like, I can think of a lot of people that I think are maybe I could consider his contemporaries, even though they don't sound like Andrew Bird. But I'm curious to hear what you had as an answer to this question.
I couldn't come up with anything really. I mean, I do want to share a fun anecdote, but in no way am I saying this artist is a contemporary to Andrew Bird, but I will say that I had a similar experience when I discovered this artist. uh it was like the same time, and he was kind of using the same tools to get his songs across, but in no way do I think Keller Williams is a contemporary to Andrew Bird. But I remember seeing Keller Williams for the first time at this same time, and Keller Williams used the pedals the same way that Andrew Bird would. Is Keller Williams would have a lot of instruments on stage. He would go over, record a bass line or record a drum machine line, and then use that in his song, in kind of his one man show, the way that Andrew Bird did. I kind of lost track of Keller Williams and couldn't tell you anything that he's done in the last 23 years. Whereas Andrew Bird, I'm just a gigantic fan of Andrew Bird, and I've just closely followed his career this whole time. But that's a fun little anecdote that I pulled from my pulled from my brain. But when I was sitting down thinking, okay, who is Andrew Bird like? Or who, if you like Andrew Bird, you would also like this other person. I couldn't think of anybody.
Yeah. It's tricky. I went. Some of these people are people that he's collaborated with or toured with or whatever. But some of the names that came to mind are Wilco, both from the Chicago area, can kind of venture into different music. There is a cool clip of online. I wish I'd been there for this show, but where they played Jesus, etc., and Andrew Bird came out and played that violin part, which is
Oh
just like
gosh,
super super
that's
cool. It's like
amazing.
someone on their phone who had recorded it, but it's like, man, I wish we had like an official live version of that. How cool would that be? So I have them on the list, and then just kind of a list of people that I feel like are a little esoteric, or Beirut, Iron and Wine, Sufjan Stevens, Fleet Foxes, Grizzly Bear, Kishibashi. He did a video with Fiona Apple off of "Are You Serious?" The song was kisses, left-handed kisses. It's a really cool video, by the way, and a really good song. And so, I thought maybe she could make the list. But again, none of those people sound like Andrew Bird. But if I were trying to think of contemporaries, like I could think of a list of people who I mean, I would put Wilco for me. Like I love Wilco a lot too. Most of the artists I've mentioned, I don't listen to as often as I listen to Andrew Bird. I don't really listen to Iron and Wine that much, and I really like Beirut, but I don't follow Beirut's career all that much. And same thing with Fleet Foxes, Grizzly
Are
Bear.
you familiar?
But
Are you familiar with the Decemberist?
yes, I am.
That was one that when I, asked the Google machine who is like Andrew Bird, that's one they came up with, but I don't know anything by them. I think Sufjan Stevens is a great one. I forgot all about him. Another person that I would say, I thought of, hint, hint, this may come up later, answer for a question is like the Shins or James
Mm,
Mercer. I think
mm.
James Mercer has a beautiful singing voice similar to Andrew Bird.
That's a good one. I hadn't thought about that. I like that. Okay, if my finest work yet was a movie, what movie would this be?
Okay, this was really hard. I picked The Wizard of Oz. And
Okay.
after you told me what Andrew Bird said about kind of the theme of um my finest work yet, I'm really happy I chose that. Kind of the infinite struggle of good versus evil, an adversary, and we're on this great journey battling our adversaries. I thought of Wizard of Oz because I just thought, I literally asked Google, what is a perfect movie? Because
Yeah.
I think my finest work yet is a perfect album.
Yeah.
So, and also The Wizard of Oz is a classic that it's timeless. I can show it to my kids today for the first time. They're filled with awe and wonder, just like I was when I watched Wizard of Oz for the first time. almost 40 years ago, probably the same way my parents saw Wizard of Oz for the first time whenever, they saw it. So I think Wizard of Oz is definitely a timeless classic that will, just keep being popular with the next generation.
That's great. I love that answer, and we came at it from very different angles. I'll tell you, my answer is another. I feel like this movie's kind of close to perfection, but I went with No Country for Old Men. Um,
That's pretty much the same
it's
as
the
Wizard of
same
Oz.
as Wizard of
You watch
Oz.
them
There's
the
a lot
same
of
night, one before the other.
that's a good double feature. Wizard of Oz and No Country for Old Men. You know what? There's a in No Country for Old Men. That whole adversarial thing. I mean, that movie is sort of a cat and mouse game, and there's also this boogeyman that's kind of at the center of it. Like a lot of the lyrics in the album, there's always this sort of menacing figure that's at the center of it, and Javier Bardem would play that part in No Country for Old Men. And then there's also, I feel like that movie, the timeless thing, Take a Drink. It's timeless in the fact that that movie feels almost like a '70s movie or something. There's a kind of a rawness and a ruggedness to it that I really appreciate, and there's a gravity to both of those films too. I feel like that I don't know. I could see them being kindred spirits. So,
I
No
love it.
Country for Old Men. What band or artist would you like to hear cover My Finest Work Yet?
Okay, I gave you a hint on this one. It's but it's Broken Bells
Okay.
because I like when Brian Burton I like James Mercer best when he's being influenced by Brian Burton. And so
Mm,
that's how I want to see a new spin on My Finest Work Yet, and maybe bring some beats into the mix or some synthesizers, but with James Mercer's buttery smooth, what do you call it, falsetto, matching what Andrew Bird, I mean, you can't match it, but doing the best you can to match what Andrew Bird's put down on this great album. How about you? Who's covering it? Who's the dream cover for you?
Going back in the time machine, and I'm gonna have like 1970s Scott Walker cover this album. And like Scott
Wow.
Walker comes up, yeah, I mean, it would get darker and it would probably be a little weirder at times. But there are a couple artists, like recently, as we're talking about this, Pulp has released a new album, More. And I feel like Jarvis Cocker always kind of gets the Scott Walker label, and Scott Walker produced a Pulp album, so I mean that's probably part of the reason. But there aren't a ton there. Anytime someone kind of ventures into this sort of crooner, but not Sinatra crooner, but like a little later, like '60s and '70s, the Scott Walker comparisons I think are inevitable, and I can hear a little Scott Walker, the Walker brothers maybe, in this album and influence in this album. I've never heard Andrew Bird talk about it, but I can just feel that. And so I figured, well, let's go back to the source. Let's have Scott Walker do it, and he'll be get weird with it. Maybe he'll keep it true to form, and it'll remain largely intact. But I think he could handle the lushness of it, and I would like to hear that. So Scott Walker is my answer.
I love it.
So if Andrew Bird was an athlete, who would Andrew Bird be?
Okay, first of all, this is my favorite question. Although I think it's one of your favorites too.
Yeah.
Just like imagining Jeff Tweedy doing something athletic, it's almost as funny imagining Andrew Bird doing something athletic. Although Andrew is tall, and just looking at his waistline, you would imagine seems to be in some kind of good shape.
Yeah.
So I think Andrew could, maybe play the wing for an NBA team if he had to. But
Mm.
Andrew Bird is much, much more important than a just a fitting piece to a basketball team. He is iconic athlete Jim Thorpe. Do you
Oh, I
remember
like
Jim
this.
Thorpe?
I do. I do. I'm looking forward to hearing the similarities here.
Well, I was gonna just go off all the knowledge that I retained from doing my third grade book report, but I decided to ask Wikipedia because, gosh, my brain, I mean, I've just put it through so much since third grade that it's hard to remember it all. Let's see if I can bring up something. Okay, this is too hard looking at this screen. Let me just think. Okay, Jim Thorpe won a bunch of gold medals in the Olympics. I'm pretty sure he played professional baseball. He was good at pretty much every sport. So just like Andrew Bird, who's pretty much good at everything, and everything he touches turns to solid gold, Jim Thorpe also just, if Jim Thorpe and Jim Brown met in a parking lot in a bar, Jim Thorpe might take him. He was just that strong and athletic. So think Jim Brown, and then just think of a white guy in a headband that had Native American background, and that's Jim Thorpe.
It's funny when I think of Jim Thorpe, I just think of like that picture of him like holding the little like the old school leather helmets. It's like you. It's like a book report or something. That's my knowledge of Jim Thorpe, but I love it. That's amazing. Okay, for me, I'm going with Tim Duncan. Andrew Bird is the Tim Duncan of indie music.
I
Okay,
believe it.
elegance, consistency, cerebral, quietly one of the greats. I mean, we have the focus on the fundamentals. We know that Andrew Bird had some classical training. He was virtuosic at a young age. Over time, I mean, gosh, you think about how into Andrew Bird we were when we saw him at High on Rose, and then this album came out almost 20 years later. And so that's longevity. And Tim Duncan definitely had that. It felt like Tim Duncan just kind of, in many ways, just kind of kept getting better throughout most of his career. And just like, this guy can get even better. But he was never one of the ones that stole the spotlight, or that, people aren't even today. I mean, you can make a lot of like, you can look at MVPs and stuff and be like, dude, why are we not talking about Tim Duncan? But he's usually, people just don't think about him in the conversation of the greatest of all time. I mean, he was an amazing player. So he kind of is kind of slide through the radar. And I feel like Andrew Bird does that too. Low key persona, a ton of respect from people that know him, integrity. There's this identity, and then these quiet legends. So for me, that's the Andrew Bird equivalent. Is he's the Tim Duncan of indie music.
The big fundamental. I love it.
Okay, last question. Do you take something away from my finest work yet, other than this is a collection of great songs?
Here's what I take away from it. Andrew Bird is an amazing musician who's recorded lots of music, and this truly may be his finest work yet. So, as I am bad about I'm not good about seeing a piece of art or hearing a piece of art or reading a book and be like, what's the bigger picture? I'm just not geared that way. So I didn't really get all the meaning behind the music that Andrew Bird wrote. And really, I'm not one of those people that need that. Just I usually take it on the surface and it's like, this is great, or this is just not really doing it for me. And this is great. You line it up with everything he's ever done, and it stands up as just as good or better than everything else. And so that's what I take away from is this is just, we talk about timeless take a drink albums um that stand, that will be in Mount Rushmores, or these are the greatest. And so I just think that this is one that when Andrew Bird hangs it up and somebody says, okay, of all the Andrew Bird works, this is one of the finest. So that's what I take away from it.
That's a great answer. I feel like, yeah, man, this album. like this is what greatness is like. This is greatness. If you want to see what that is in a really pure form, I think my finest work yet. I agree with you. I think this was almost an inside joke. I wonder if he looks back on it and feels that way. You know, as an artist, you probably hope that the latest album that you put out is your finest work. But I really think that that album title ended up kind of fitting here. He's one of a kind. The mood and the atmosphere that he can create, we talked about that. It's hypnotic. And then he's also this incredible songwriter, and he has this wit and humor, but there's this sort of contemplativeness in there. His observations, he can talk about stuff that's really mundane, or he can, on this album, talk about things that are a lot bigger and have those big ideas, like the need for an adversary that are genuine, like they're genuinely insightful, thought provoking. So the fact that he blends all of that together in this album, I mean, it might be the best representation of what Andrew Bird offers, and that alone makes it interesting. In addition to the commentary on the environment in which he wrote this album, you know, the commentary on all of that, I think is really astute, and it's all true, and it's true today. It was true 2,000 years ago. So he really touched on something big here, and I think that makes it all the more appealing as more than just a collection of great songs and something that's worth checking out. Man, there's so many Andrew Bird albums that we could have talked about, and we discussed a lot of them beforehand. I think we're both happy we ended up with this one, but you know, I would imagine that if anybody's watching this, they probably like Andrew Bird, so we're probably preaching to the choir. If you're for some reason you aren't an Andrew Bird fan or you just have never heard him, this go do it. What are you waiting for? Get on it. Otherwise, I don't know. Any other parting thoughts about this album? I mean, this was a blast to listen to this on a repeat. I hope you had a good experience too.
I did. Yeah. I, you know, just, I will say I meant to bring up this anecdote earlier. I got to see Andrew Bird in December of 2017 in Nashville. So, you know, right before he's going to record this album, and you know, in the middle of probably working on it, he probably played something from this album, and I wasn't familiar with it and didn't remember. But it was the first concert I took my wife to, and you know, Andrew Bird's one of the first artists that my wife and I can enjoy listening to together. So that's fun that you know, that it's something that that you've enjoyed for a long time, and then your spouse who you introduced to, they're like, oh yeah, I like that too. So so yeah, I have fond memories of seeing Andrew Bird in concert and listening to his albums from 25 years ago, and I have fond memories of what he's doing now, and looking forward to the next time I can see Andrew Bird in concert. So it's fun when you've got somebody who you've been a fan of a long time who's still doing great stuff.
So funny you say that about you and your wife. The song when my wife walked down the aisle was Pulaski at Night by Andrew Bird. We both just love that song so much. It holds a lot of meaning for us because of that. And it just has such a beautiful song. And like, he makes that kind of music. It can appeal to so many different people. It can be romantic. It can be funny. It can just be fun. And it's a special thing that you can share with a lot of people, because I think there's a way more, he just has this universal appeal that is rare to find, especially a lot of the artists that we listen to. There's so many artists that I love that it's like, I'm not even going to try with this one. I'm not even trying to expose my wife to this one. But with somebody like Andrew Bird, like, she could immediately appreciate it, and it just kind of held a deeper meaning for us. So super cool. We'll find more reasons to talk about Andrew Bird. It never ends. Someday we are going to talk about perennial favorites. If you're out there and you're listening to this and you know the album and you're like, I love perennial, like, you have to let us know. Leave a comment that's like, I know that album. I love that album, because you know, you should listen to that. If you know Andrew Bird but you don't know perennial favorites, please listen to it and let us know what you think, because it's something special, and we're definitely going to talk about it someday. Yeah, let us know the answers to your question. What athlete is Andrew Bird? That's one of our favorites to get into. What movie is this? Is this album? all those questions. We want to hear from you. If you liked this, then like the video, subscribe to the channel. We'll keep the content coming. I'm glad you chose Andrew Bird, buddy. This has been a lot of fun. We have a deep history with this, and it's been a blast. So thanks for choosing one of our favorites.
It's been a blast. Yeah, my pleasure.